The same very force that hangs the stars and keeps the planet in motion is operating in and through and as your life. This couldn't be anything but true. And if anyone saw the supermoon, it's magnificent. Isn't it magnificent? If you take a moment to really pause and look at nature and really honor nature and really see it, and just think of that. Think of the stars hanging in the sky, and think of the beauty of the moon, and think of the creation, the perfection, the reality of nature, what it really is. It is awe-inspiring, isn't it? I mean, really, truly. We don't always pause to see how magnificent it is that this cycle of life, that this creation that we're in the midst of, that we get to see, is also what we are. There is no way it's possible for us not to be as magnificent as all of the rest of creation. It's the truth of our being. Are we willing to look at the possibility that human creation is fully awe-inspiring? That the same very energy and force field that grows the grass is growing you, that hangs the stars is holding on to you, that shapes the moon is the ebb and flow of your life, that it can be trusted. Do we recognize that we are of this same creative force? That the designing and the operating force in the universe surrounds our very birth here on this planet, surrounds our very birth, our arrival. We're entering the season of Advent, and in Unity we have the beauty of expressing and moving through things externally, but also the mindfulness to move through things internally and metaphysically. So as we celebrate the guidance of the stars, as we celebrate the birth, we recognize that if taken as a spiritual practice, this season of Advent can bring us into a new birth within ourselves. It can birth an awakening within ourselves. Because we are operating in this infinite universe. We are, in fact, stars in motion. And no doubt there is an operating cycle in life. But we often, sometimes, with the human condition, act like we're not part of this cycle. There's life and death. There's supermoons, there's tides. Sometimes we forget we are of nature, that we are one with its operation. But if we can slow down and tune in enough, we can recognize that there are internal seasons. And once we learn them, once we open ourselves to actually flow with them and allow that support, we begin to feel and recognize that we are more supported than we are realizing. That there is something waiting there to support us if we could just get with the program. Have you ever tried to walk with someone, maybe a partner I'm thinking about in junior high, my little junior high boyfriend? We would walk along and you know, the leg difference of how long your legs are or whatever, and so we'd walk along and we'd be off beat, and when we were off beat, it was just a little jolting, you know, we would go like that. And so whenever we'd walk, we'd do that, and every once in a while I'd go, just to get us into motion, right? Because, you know, if you're trying to be snuggly, it's just a little off, right? Think about that in your life. Think about that in your being. Anything that feels a little off. Anytime we're resisting the present moment, anytime we're taking what is and we're not with it, we're not in rhythm with it, we're not in harmony with it, we have the opportunity to say, what's the rhythm here? What's the beat here? What's the pace here? What's the flow here? Let me get into alignment with it. That's one of the beauties of the Unity practice, is that we don't just hope and wish for things outside of ourselves, but we say, how can I be in alignment with the highest? How can I step into it and becoming? How can I take that extra step or do whatever I need to just get into the groove of it? And that's what this season is about. This season is about becoming one with the natural cycle of life. There is a spiritual practice that even the earth itself can show us. You know, in the fall, it's a time of release. If we choose to take that on and to engage in that, at that time, there is support there. The time of Advent is a time of awakening to our true nature, that we let go, we pare down of things that no longer serve us in the fall, and then we get into alignment in Advent, into alignment with what we are. And there are specific Sundays in Advent that if we are willing to make the birth story our story, we take it out of 2,000 years and we bring it to where the master teacher told us it should be, which is right here today in every present moment in our lives, as an awakening to God consciousness, as an awakening to our true nature, and our awakening to our soul's intention. And then we have the new year, which is the time after we're grounded, after we're rooted, after we're awakened. And it's that time of seeding, planting, intending, ideating, visioning. And then we have the spring, and that's the growth. But oftentimes we can go through as if there are no seasons and do the same thing every moment. That would be like the moon staying its sliver all the time. So can we allow our spiritual practice to have ebb and flow? Can we allow it to have the movement and have the support of the natural universe, have the support of what we are, that we are infinite beings expressing as this natural force that we love to call God? This first Sunday of Advent marks hope or faith. Faith is the perceiving power linked with our ability to shape substance. It's that part of us that can know something in our hearts, know something in our being, even before it's visible. And we can stand in it and stand for it and stand with it. That we can have a feeling of wholeness even in the midst of lack. That we can have a perfect feeling of health even in the midst of disorder or dis-ease. That we can have a feeling of abundance and wholeness even in the midst of seeming poverty. And yes, that in fact, even in the midst of chaos, war, trauma, and turmoil, we can have a center of peace that is so alive and dynamic and magnetic that it shifts the very consciousness in a room, that it brings our being into each moment in a different way, in a grounded way, that we can be going through any process of life with a spiritual understanding, with a spiritual foundation that is beyond the human condition, beyond the emotions of the condition, and that we can do it cradling ourselves. The birth in the manger. Hope is a spiritual process, and tuning into hope is a spiritual process, especially when it's challenged and not handed to us. So where does your hope come from? Where do you see it? Really tune into that. What makes you hopeful? What is it that when you see it demonstrated, when you see it around you, when you feel it within you, you become hopeful? For me, one of those things is just even looking at nature and knowing that I am of that. This is life living itself. This is life living itself. There's no possibility that nature could be supported and I couldn't be supported. So how can I lean into that? Another one for me is people diving into the present moment so deeply that they have conscious conversations. I love conscious conversations. I met a friend about 7 years ago. It was on my birthday, and we were at a lunch with a group of people. And it was the first time I was introduced to her formally. And at that lunch, one of us said something about a trip that we were going to take to the Light Center, which is a Unity Alternative Ministry over in Kansas. And there was an event happening there, so we decided, one of us said we were going to go, and then the other one said, well, I'll go with you, because it was kind of this invitation thing. Well, we didn't know each other at all, and it was over an hour away about. And this turned into a little road trip with just the two of us. No one else said they would go. And both of us have a little bit of an introverted side when it comes to different things. But anyway, we get in the car, and maybe I'm just speaking of mine. Like a car ride for an hour with someone you don't know at all, for me is a little bit like, I don't know, sitting with a spider next to you. For some people, like, well, I don't know. What if we're not going to have anything to talk about? And then you got to go there, you got to be there, then you got to come back. I like having one comfort buddy with me all the time. So we get in the car to drive there. And this person who is not a friend yet, that I really don't know at all, on the way, about 5 minutes into the trip, says, well, we have a long car ride. And I was thinking, on the way there, one of us could tell our story. And on the way back, the other one could share a story. So for an hour, on the way there, I presenced her story, her life story, the depth of it, the parts that don't normally come out even after you've known someone for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. And you could only imagine that by the end of the trip, I was absolutely in love with the person I was sitting with. And then we had this experience, and having this experience where we could have been completely strangers was deepened because there was vulnerability and sharing. And on the way back, it was my turn, and I shared my story. And that woman then became one of my best friends. She's now living in India. But I was completely touched and floored by the fact that an opportunity arose that wasn't just sitting there, it was created consciously. It was a person making a decision to take something that could be absolutely normal and ordinary and deciding to turn it into something extraordinary. To just see if something might be created, if a door is opened, if a deeper connection is made. I mean, how many times could that happen and you could just listen to music the whole time and talk for 5 minutes? Or how many times could that happen and you could just complain about the things in your life? But to really sit there and to take the time and invest in the person with you, and to trust the person with you, and to trust that each moment is ripe with possibilities, and we might be sitting on a relationship, a friendship, a beauty that is simply whispering to us, give me space to emerge. Knowing that is always available in every second gives me hope. Knowing that there can be people that I could sit next to for years and not really say a thing, maybe just wave, that could later on be one of the most valuable people in my life. That in fact could almost save you at times. I was listening to a story not long ago. Can I share it? Gizzard. I didn't ask pre-permission. I don't tell stories without asking pre-permission. I was present to this story. I won't get the whole thing right. You can ask after the service if you want to know who. I'll point you in that direction. But there was a guy once who didn't like cats. Anyway, long story short, a neighbor, his mother passed, the neighbor's mother passed, and so there was a cat there, and they asked this man and his wife if they would take in the cat. And they were, maybe a little hesitant, but they said that they would. So they had 2 beloved animals, dogs, pass, and so they thought, okay, we can do this. They took in the cat, and As it turns out, they decided that they would get a buddy for this cat because the cat was alone, so let's get two. And so they went, and they needed to get one that was declawed because this one was declawed, so that was important. So they went to the pet rescue, and they found one cat there that was, fit what they were looking for, and they brought him home. And that cat's name was Gizzard, I think is right, Gizzard. And he still didn't really like cats and was still not really interested, but this guy is a guy of heart and a guy of integrity and a guy of soul. And so I know that the commitment to taking care of the neighbor's mother's cat was strong. And then his wife is a lover of all things life, and once you fall in love with a little being, you're going to keep it around. So just a few months later, the original cat passed, made its transition. And so here is this guy going, we don't even have to keep the cat now. The original intention for getting the cat is now gone. And now I got this other cat to deal with, and I don't even really like cats. And then to make it even worse and complicated, the grandkids were allergic to cats. So then when the grandkids are coming over to the house, they have to take medication for the cats, and so that they can be here. And this guy just doesn't like cats, and he's like, let's just get rid of this cat. There's people that say they'll take this cat. He's like, yay. His wife is like, no, sir, not gonna happen. I love this cat. Deal with it. And then fast forward to a heart-centered, sensitive time in life when they are bringing their mother into their home who needs care, and their mother is working through some Alzheimer's and dementia, and the mother is having this experience where she is feeling that there are mice around biting her. Just imagine that for a moment. So they go to her place, and there's mouse traps and there's mouse poison, and she is very severely disturbed that she's been bitten by these creatures and that they're around and they are torturing, terrorizing her. I mean, just breathe into that for a moment, that's your mama. And so they go through a process, and they're working through getting her home and getting her to come move into their home. And all of a sudden, a little light comes on, and in the process of trying to do the convincing of, it's going to be good, come to our place, it's going to be good, and there's a little resistance. And they say, you know what? We have this cat, Gizzard, and Gizzard catches mice and eats bugs. So all of these things that you're worried about, Gizzard will get them, and will get them all. And so she's like, well, that kind of sounds good. That kind of sounds good. So she comes to the house. And what was torture before, mental torture, mental anguish, now completely shifted. Now she has a buddy that goes around and eats all the bugs and catches all of the mice and makes sure that nothing is torturing her anymore. There's a shift. Any of you who have worked in this area of life and experience and consciousness know that a shift like that is a miracle. A shift like that on your heart is a tearful, eternal gratitude. So this man then becomes a lover and an advocate of the cat, because the cat that was once the burden is now the cat that is the savior, the cat that is the comfort. I was recently at Lake Giacomo and sitting on a rock watching the sunset. And as the sun was setting, I looked to my left, and what I didn't see when I walked up there at all were a bunch of light, very, very, very tiny cobwebs, almost like a matrix. Not just a couple of them, but tons of them, tons of them that could not be seen without the light pouring in, like a woven tapestry that, you know what I'm talking about? You know how you can see dust in your kitchen when just the sun's just right and you're like, whoa, we walk around in that all the time. It was like that, but it's all spider webs. But it wasn't scary because it was just beautiful and there weren't spiders attached to the cobwebs. But this just matrix of everything that's there that we don't see. And then I started looking at how close it came to me and I was like, well, you know what? Like, if it's right there, that means it's probably right here, too. And I started really looking at the sun, trying to see, like, how close do they get? Like, yeah, there is one there. And going, like, I walked into it, like, I'm in the middle of it. They're right here and around all of the time. And I thought about how that's like life. There is something around us all the time. There is something available all the time. And that is our hope. Our hope is that there is so much more sitting right next to us, sitting within us, than we could ever imagine. We wouldn't even have time to cash it all in. We wouldn't have time to mark all of the links and all of the webs, to see how much is interrelated. We wouldn't be able to even comprehend the beauty of what keeps everything in motion, how infinitely we are connected, and how wondrous it truly is. So hope and faith to me in this birthing of the Advent season is the remembrance that it's available anytime, in any second that I want to say yes. When I'm wanting and willing to say yes, and I decide to take the next step to look with spiritual vision, or to become vulnerable and to connect, or to see something in a different way than I ever saw it before, or I ever tried to interpret it, to let go of all my preconceived notions of what's coming or what's been, and to just engage in the spiritual process, then I am awakened. Hermann Hesse said, when we have learned how to listen to trees, then the brevity and the quickness and the childlike hastiness of our thoughts achieve an incomparable joy. He also said, when we are stricken and cannot bear our lives any longer, then a tree has something to say to us. Be still. Be still. Look at me. Are we willing to look at hope? To not just look for it outside of ourselves, but to generate it within ourselves. Because the true hope that will come to our rescue in the birthing of awakening is already here, it has already arrived, and it already exists within each one of us. David White, the author of The Journey, said, "You are not leaving, even as the light fades quickly now. You are arriving." There is our hope. Namaste.